Hello, and welcome to this series of videos on using T-splines in the Matrix 7 whip. We're going to focus today on how to use T-splines and easily create T-spline surfaces for use in your modeling techniques. So we're going to start with a way that I like to create things, and that is the extrude method of T-splines. And if you haven't yet played with T-splines, there's a couple of areas that we can go to in the program to get at T-splines functions. The most noticeable when you got your Matrix 7 whip is probably the Matrix 7 drop-down, where you'll see a lot of T-spline related commands. Now many of these are T-spline builders that were written just for Matrix, and then the other one is things like the T-splines heads-up display, and I'll explain how some of those work in detail. The other area where you can get at T-splines commands are in the round button bars over on the left-hand side at the top. You'll see T-splines has replaced the blend targets menu, and blend targets have now been moved up to the drop-down menu for those of you that still use them. So if we click the T-splines menu button here, we'll see that here are several different commands and 3 rows of commands that all pertain to T-splines in some way or shape, or that we feel will help you when using T-splines, things like the center objects and the set points, which we'll talk about later. So the first thing that you'll notice is icon number 1. These are all sort of laid out in order of use the most to use the least. So one of the things that you'll be using the most of is the T-splines HUD, or heads-up display. And if we click that, you'll see it brings up a new menu that we can tear off and kind of put wherever we want. This is a menu that sort of gets used quite frequently to select various aspects of the T-spline model, or to move, scale, and rotate it and manipulate it using the on-screen sort of little widget. So we're going to just put this out here, and this will keep me from having to travel across the screen quite often to get at these different buttons. Now later on, as you become more proficient in using some of these tools, you can actually enable the hotkeys for T-splines, and that actually allows you to use your keyboard to do the same thing that these buttons do here. But for the sake of the video, we're going to use all the buttons. I would encourage you to get familiar with the keyboard shortcuts, as they'll help you in your proficiency and really help sort of move all the program out of the way and allow you to just be fluid in using your designs or your T-splines tools to create your designs. So the first thing that we're going to do here is we're going to select this circle that I have out here, and you'll notice that we have a T-spline widget out here, and this is the transform widget that's located under MSR. And you can see that that is active. If I click it, it toggles it off and on. This allows us to do basically the same thing that the Matrix MSR does, as well as if you have the Rhino Gumball plugin installed, the same thing that Gumball does. So from this, we can simply move in a scaled or in a constrained direction, like in Z or X or Y, as well as 2-axis constraints in X and Y here, or X and Z here, or Y and Z here. We also have a scale command. The scale allows us to do the exact same thing. We can scale in X and Y here. Of course, scaling in Z won't do us much good. Here's a 3D scale by clicking on the center here. Scale 1D, kind of goofy there. Or scale 1D here, since this is a circle and it doesn't have any Z. And scale 1D here. So those are all the different ways to use the manipulator using scale. We have rotate, which is pretty straightforward. That allows you to rotate everything. And then we have a set pivot, which allows you to set the pivot point from where you want to rotate or scale or transform or do whatever it is that you would like to do, whatever type of manipulation or transform tool you have that you're needing to do. So with the curve selected, we're going to press the extrude button, and essentially this will begin creating a T-splines object for us. I've clicked it once, and if we zoom way in, you'll see that a small surface has been created around the outside of this curve. Without clicking anything else and clicking directly on the scale manipulator and dragging the X and Y in, you can see that it's creating this surface going around, and I'll shade that to make it a little easier to see. So what we've done was click the scale, or the extrude icon, with the curve selected, and then scaled that inward to begin creating a surface. Now every single time we click extrude, it adds another row of these faces, or another ring of edges. So we'll click scale again, and as you can see, here we have another row of what are called T-spline faces. Now, the next thing that we should talk about probably are this mode, or the different modes and the ways that you can select different aspects of the T-spline models. The first way that you're probably most familiar with are by the vertices of the model. So we can come in here and select vertex, and that allows us to select just the different areas that are vertice related, and we can move those and transform those however we want. So we can actually pull on those, which probably reminds you quite a bit of Cage Edit or something of that nature with working with curves or points and surfaces. The next way is through edges. This way allows you to actually select on an edge and pull the edge to deform the surface. To select multiple edges, you just simply hold down Shift, or if we double click an edge, it'll select an entire ring or loop of edges. Now this happens to be a loop. If we were to select them this way and we wanted to select every other one like this, you can actually select this ring icon right here, and that will select and try to figure out the ring of edges that it thinks that you're after. Okay, and then the other way is by faces. Now in face mode, if you double click on the face, it won't select a ring. It wants to know the direction that you want to face. So if we click one face and then we shift and click the next face and double click it, then it determines that we want to go in a direction, and it selects all the way around and gives us an entire loop that way. So lastly, we have the entire T-spline object. When we're in that mode, it selects the whole entire T-spline object. So we have verts, edges, faces, and the entire object. Now, when you're working, there's no best way or worst way to work with these. You'll find that you'll toggle back and forth through all these quite often. So we're going to continue on extruding out some edges here. So I'm going to move back into the edge mode, select that loop of edges. I'll come out of this full scale kind of view here. Maybe I'll stay in it. We'll just move the heads up display a little bit. And we're going to just keep clicking extrude, and this time instead of scaling in, I'm just going to move up, and you can see the surface just pulls right out of that, and we can move it to anywhere that we want. I seem to have the Y and Z axis selected instead of just the Z, so I'll back up and fix that. Now, everywhere that there is a loop, it creates a tighter transition the closer that they are together. So you can see that this looks like it has like sort of a tighter fillet or tighter radius to it than when it's farther apart from another edge. Okay, so if we wanted a really tight sort of radius there, we would insert that row, maybe bring it to here, and then extrude again and bring out another one, and that'll help keep that corner nice and tight for us. And so every time we press extrude, we get another row there. And maybe I'll extrude again, and this time we'll go back to scale, and I'll scale outwards. Maybe I'll try to match up what we did on the bottom. So in the looking down, I'll just kind of scale it out to that ring that's down here, that loop that's down there. Then we'll extrude one more time, back to scale, come out all the way out here, kind of match those up. Now another way we can extrude instead of constantly reaching over for the extrude icon is by holding the Alt key on our keyboard. So if we go into the MSR mode and go into the Move transform, we'll hold Alt, so I'm pressing Alt with my thumb on the keyboard right now, and I'm going to left click and tug on the Z Move icon, and that creates another row of faces. So I'm going to hold Alt again, left click, tug, then let go of Alt and let go of left click, and just keep repeating that. Press Alt, left click and drag. And so real quickly that gives us an easy way to keep inserting edges and faces there. That's Alt and left click to drag out or extrude out a new row of faces. So now I want to join up the bottom to the top here and have sort of this lifesaver shape. Let's grab this curve, we'll put it on the red layer and get rid of it so we don't select it. So we'll hold shift and we'll double left click that row, hold shift, double left click that row. You don't have to hold shift on the first one, but I do it just so that we can select multiple rows here. And then we'll click this other command that's called Merge Edges. And what this will do is it'll weld these edges together for us nice and neatly and make our object solid. So that has taken both of those edges and created one solid object for us there. So I've double clicked that row and I'll just kind of pull that down and kind of straighten that out so it sort of has an even bit of radius on the top and the bottom. And so by extruding a simple round circular curve, we've managed to just pull this shape, this sort of torus-like shape out of it. And now we can come in and play with it and however we see fit to adjust it by simply scaling, moving, and rotating the faces of it. So that's one easy way of using a simple curve and pulling and scaling your surfaces out of it.